China has announced it will facilitate the travel of 1,000 Indian pilgrims for this year's Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. Being significant to Hindus as the abode of Lord Shiva, it also holds religious importance for Jains and Buddhists. The Chinese embassy in India hailed the resumption of the pilgrimage, which is known for its religious value and cultural significance, and is undertaken by hundreds of people each year. He expressed optimism that the pilgrimage will become a bridge of faith, friendship, and people-to-people bonds between the two countries.
Kailash is one of the most mysterious places on the entire planet. It sits deep in the Tibetan Himalayas, and it has never been climbed by any human being, not a single person in all of recorded history. But that's not even the strangest part. For thousands of years, monks, pilgrims, scientists, and explorers have all reported things around this mountain that they simply cannot explain. Strange phenomena, bizarre experiences, things that don't follow the normal rules of the world we live in. And now, in recent years, Tibetan monks who have spent decades living near the mountain have started speaking publicly about what they truly believe is happening there, and what they're saying is deeply unsettling. The mountain nobody has ever climbed. When you look at Mount Kailash from a distance, it looks less like a natural mountain and more like something that was deliberately constructed. It is perfectly symmetrical in a way that seems almost impossible for nature to achieve on its own. Mountains far taller and far more dangerous than Kailash have been climbed by humans. Everest has been summited over 10,000 times. K2, which many climbers consider far more deadly than Everest, has been climbed dozens of times. But Mount Kailash, which is technically not even among the world's 100 tallest peaks, has never once been successfully climbed. And it's not for lack of trying. Over the centuries, many expedition teams have attempted to reach the summit. Every single one of them has either turned back voluntarily or been forced to abandon their attempt by circumstances they struggled to fully explain. In 2001, China officially banned any climbing of Mount Kailash at the request of Hindu and Buddhist religious groups who consider the mountain sacred. But even before that ban, the mountain had already developed a well-earned reputation for being impossible to summit. Climbers reported sudden and extreme weather changes that appeared out of nowhere. Others reported strange disorientation and confusion at altitude levels where they should have been perfectly fine. Some reported that no matter how long they climbed, they never seemed to get any closer to the top. The mountain just seemed not to want to be climbed, and that feeling was very hard to shake. The river of the world. Now here is where things start to get genuinely strange. At the base of Mount Kailash sits Lake Mansarovar, which at an altitude of 4,590 meters is one of the highest freshwater lakes in the world. And from the general region around Kailash, 4 of Asia's most important rivers have their sources. The Indus, the Brahmaputra, the Sutlej, and the Karnali all flow outward from the Kailash region, and they flow in the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. These 4 rivers collectively provide water to nearly 2 billion people across India, China, Nepal, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Scientists who have studied this have called it one of the most extraordinary hydrological coincidences on the planet. The idea that 4 massive rivers with sources near a single mountain would flow in perfectly opposite directions almost defies what we understand about natural geography. River systems simply don't behave this way under normal circumstances. Ancient Hindu texts called the Puranas actually described this phenomenon thousands of years before modern science confirmed it. The texts described Kailash as the source of 4 great rivers flowing out to the 4 corners of the world. For a very long time, historians assumed this was mythology. Then satellite mapping confirmed the rivers were real and their sources were exactly where the ancient texts said they were. This raised a very uncomfortable question. How did people writing thousands of years ago know the precise geographical layout of a remote corner of Tibet they almost certainly never visited? What the monks know. For generations, Tibetan monks living in monasteries near Mount Kailash have kept detailed oral records of everything that has happened around the mountain. These records go back centuries, and they contain accounts of phenomena that monks have observed and experienced firsthand. In recent years, particularly after the growing global interest in Kailash following several viral scientific discussions, some of these monks have started sharing portions of these accounts more publicly than ever before. And what they describe is deeply unsettling. Multiple monks across different monasteries have independently reported the same experience near the mountain. Time seems to move differently there, not in a vague poetic sense, but in a measurable, literal sense. Monks who spend extended periods near the mountain report that their hair and fingernails grow at an extraordinary rate, far faster than normal biological processes would allow. Some accounts describe nail and hair growth that would normally take weeks appearing to happen within a single day or two of being near the mountain. Several Western researchers who have visited the Kailash region over the past 2 decades have reported similar things. A group of Russian scientists who visited the area in the early 2000s came back claiming that they had aged at an accelerated rate during their time near the mountain. Some reported that nail growth they would typically expect over 2 to 3 weeks had occurred in just 12 hours. Now, it is important to be clear that these accounts have not been scientifically verified under controlled laboratory conditions, but the fact that people from completely different cultures, different eras, and different parts of the world are reporting the exact same phenomenon independently of each other is something that is very hard to simply dismiss. The monks have a name for this. They call it the mountain's breath. They believe Kailash exists on a different frequency of time than the rest of the world, and that getting too close to it pulls you into that frequency temporarily. The shape that shouldn't exist. Here is the detail about Mount Kailash that has genuinely troubled geologists and researchers for decades. The mountain is shaped like a perfect pyramid. Not approximately like a pyramid, not sort of like a pyramid in a loose general sense. A strikingly precise 4-sided pyramid with faces that align almost exactly to the compass points and angles that are remarkably uniform on all sides. Natural geological formations almost never produce this kind of clean, precise symmetry. Mountains form through tectonic collision, erosion, and volcanic activity, messy, chaotic forces that produce jagged, irregular shapes. The kind of clean, precise symmetry that Kailash displays is not something that geology naturally tends to produce.
Russian researcher Ernst Muldashev, who led multiple scientific expeditions to the Kailash region in the late 1990s and early 2000s, made a claim that generated enormous controversy. He argued after his studies that Kailash showed signs of being a man-made, or at the very least, artificially altered structure, a pyramid constructed by an ancient civilization so far in the past that the natural world had slowly begun to reclaim it. He pointed to what he described as geometric precision in the mountain's faces and the presence of several smaller pyramid-shaped formations around Kailash that seemed to mirror its structure. The mainstream scientific community largely rejected this theory, and it remains unproven. But even scientists who dismiss the pyramid theory acknowledge that the mountain's symmetry is unusually striking and is not straightforwardly explained by standard geological processes. The conversation about how exactly Kailash came to look the way it does has not been fully settled. The wall of ice. Here is something that is completely verifiable and documented, and it raises serious questions on its own. Despite being only 6,638 meters tall, a height that experienced climbers regularly summit on other mountains, the upper portion of Kailash appears to be functionally inaccessible. This is not just because of the China climbing ban. Before the ban, numerous skilled climbers attempted to approach the upper faces of the mountain, and all of them encountered the same problem. The ice on the upper walls of Kailash forms in configurations that are unlike normal glacial ice. The angles are too steep, the surfaces too vertical, the ice too unpredictably shifting. Multiple expedition leaders who attempted routes up Kailash's faces before 2001 reported that the mountain seemed to actively resist approach, that routes which appeared viable from a distance became impassable at close range in ways they hadn't anticipated. There is also the matter of the weather. The atmospheric conditions around the summit of Kailash are extraordinarily unpredictable. Clear skies can turn into violent storms within minutes in the Kailash region, in ways that experienced Himalayan climbers describe as being unlike anything they've encountered on other peaks in the same range. The storms seem localized, specifically around the mountain itself, and they arrive with almost no warning. Tibetan monks do not find any of this surprising. They have always maintained that the mountain is actively protected, not by human hands, but by forces that operate by rules humans do not fully understand. The hidden lakes and underground theories. Surrounding Mount Kailash are two extraordinary lakes that sit almost side by side. Lake Mansarovar, which Hindus consider one of the holiest bodies of water on Earth, and Lake Rakshastal, which is a saltwater lake directly beside it. The two lakes are separated by a narrow strip of land, and they have almost opposite qualities. Mansarovar is a freshwater lake, calm and still. Rakshastal is saline, rough, and windswept. Ancient Hindu texts describe Mansarovar as the lake of the gods and Rakshastal as the lake of the demon king Ravana. Even their physical characteristics seem to mirror this ancient description. But here is what has recently attracted serious scientific attention. Sonar studies and geological surveys of the Kailash region have indicated the possible presence of large underground chambers and tunnel networks beneath the mountain itself. These findings are preliminary and have not been fully explored or confirmed, but they have been noted in geological reports examining the unusual seismic properties of the Kailash area. The region sits in a seismically active zone, and the way seismic waves travel through the mountain suggests the interior may not be entirely solid in the way other mountains in the range are. Tibetan monks have spoken about underground chambers beneath Kailash for centuries. In the bone tradition, there are detailed descriptions of what they call hidden lands beneath the mountain. Sacred spaces accessible only to those who have reached a sufficient level of spiritual development. For a long time, these were interpreted purely as spiritual metaphors. The geological surveys have not proven that these chambers exist, but they have not ruled them out either. What 2025 brought to light? In 2025, a collection of Tibetan scholars and senior monks from monasteries in the Kailash region made public statements that drew significant international attention. Speaking through translators, they described accounts passed down through their monastic lineages, accounts that they say have been carefully preserved for hundreds of years but rarely shared outside their communities. They described Kailash not as a mountain in the traditional sense, but what they called a cosmic pillar, a point where the physical world and other dimensions of existence intersect. They explained that the phenomena people experience near the mountain, time distortion, disorientation, the impossibility of climbing it, are not random. They are consistent with what their tradition has always said about the nature of Kailash. The mountain does not follow physical rules because it does not belong entirely to the physical world. They also addressed the pyramid shape directly. In the bone tradition, it is explicitly stated that the shape of Kailash is not natural, but was given to it long before recorded human history by forces their tradition does not describe as human. They do not claim to know exactly what those forces were, but they are clear that the mountain's shape is intentional. These are, of course, religious and spiritual claims, and they cannot be verified through scientific methods. But the monks make a fair point in return. The scientific methods that have been applied to Kailash so far have not produced satisfying explanations for its symmetry, its effect on time perception, its rivers, or its resistance to climbing. The mystery remains genuinely open. So what do you think is really going on at Mount Kailash? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now.